I was sitting at the kitchen table when my wife came home from the grocery store. She saw the notebook on the table in front of me and the pen in my hand and asked, "What are you doing?" I decided to take your challenge. I don't remember any arguments. Remember last week when we were reading those stories on that internet site? I commented on how bad some of them were and said that even I could have done better. You said I couldn't. You said I didn't have it in me to be creative. I guess did say that, but my comment was based on what I know about your grades when we were in school. You always got a 4 and a 3 on your papers in classes that required written reports, and you got a 3 on the work you had to do for business research and report writing. Well, I think I can do better than that. Never mind, come help me get the groceries in. I helped her get the bags in and helped her put some things away, then sat back down at the table and started writing. As I was making dinner, she asked, "What are you writing about?" She asked, "I won't say anything yet. I'll let you read it when I'm done and you can critique it before I put it up on the website. I didn't think it would be too hard." Yeah, everything I did in college didn't bring in great grades, but I didn't want it to. At the time, I was only doing what I had to do to survive those classes. For one thing, I didn't want to be there, but my parents more or less blackmailed me. My dad wouldn't let me work in the family business unless I had a bachelor's degree in business management. I'd worked there after school and summers since I was 13, and I wanted to work there when I graduated from high school, but Dad said no, not without a degree that's required for you to come here to work full-time. So I got over it and went to school. I got my degree and went to work in the family business. I lowered my gaze to my notebook, picked up a pen, and began. My name is Josh Barnum. I'm an airplane mechanic for a major airline carrier, and I'm married to Melinda Barnum. Melinda. I call her Melly, is an office manager for an insurance company. Melly and I have been together for a little over 11 years, and we have been married for 9 of those years. We met our sophomore year of college, and for me it was love at first sight, and for Melly not so much. It took me 3 months to get a date with her. We started dating on our 7th date. We made love for the first time. After that, we became a regular couple, and usually made love 2 or 3 times a week, at least until the summer between our sophomore and junior years. I had a summer job working for my Uncle Bill, who owned a landscaping company. I worked 10 to 12 hours a day, Monday through Saturday. As a result, I was rarely able to see Melly during the week after 3 weeks of seeing each other. Only on Sundays, Melly started seeing other guys. When I complained about this, she told me to get over it or lose my Sundays. It was a defining moment in our relationship. I've said before that when it came to Melly, it was love at first sight. So I would rather give up than lose her altogether. At the time, I didn't realize what a mistake that was. It showed her that from my point of view, she could get away with a lot of things, and I would leave it at that. It was 3 weeks later, a Friday, and I had only worked 6 hours before calling a break due to severe thunderstorms. I called Melly to see if she would go out with me that night, and she told me she already had a date. I hung up without saying another word. I called around to see if anything was going on and found out that Mike Matson was having a party at his house. I called and found out I was welcome, so I decided to go. It was a bad move on my part. I walked in just in time to see Melly hugging and then kissing Dick Moore. Then they went out onto an improvised dance floor where Melly clung to Dick and they danced slowly to a song. Dick held her ass with both hands and pulled her tightly against him. Melly wrapped her arms around his neck, pulled his face to hers, and gave him a hot, lingering kiss. When the song ended, they seemed reluctant to pull away from each other, but when they finally did, Melly saw me. She said something to Dick and then headed in my direction. I turned, stepped away from her, and left the party. She probably had my phone number to reach me, but I'd be damned if I was going to stick around while she made out with someone else. The weather wasn't bad on Saturday, so I ended up switching to a 12-hour workday. I learned not to waste time calling Melly on Saturday night to set up a date for Sunday because she would be out with someone. I usually called her around 10 o'clock on Sunday and arranged something for the evening, but I didn't call that Sunday morning. It was one thing to know she was dating when I was unavailable, but quite another to know she was making out with her beau. The heat I noticed between her and her beau was a sign that they were probably two. That put a bad thought in my head, according to what Melly had told me, that she hadn't been out with any guy for more than 4 dates. The question I'd been asking myself after what I'd seen at Matson's was Melly sleeping with all of them. If she had, I could have been in trouble since we usually made love on our Sunday dates. I had heard and believed that when you have sex with someone, you have sex with everyone that person has had sex with. I thought that maybe getting tested for STDs would be a good idea, figuring that since Melly hadn't heard from me on Sunday morning, she might call me. I got the hell out of the house and was gone all day when I got home for dinner. My mom told me that Melly had called twice and wanted me to call her. When I got home, I waited until I finished dinner to call her. She got right on the cage face. Why didn't you call me this morning? I just thought, considering the way you made out with that guy last time, that I'd been replaced. We've already talked about this, Josh. I'm not staying home for premiere dates just because you can't make it. I know, and I got over it when I thought they were just platonic dates. But what I saw last time was far, far beyond platonic. I thought you and I had something special, but I'm not so sure anymore. Don't say that, Josh. We do have something special. We need to talk, Bab, baby. I don't care what time you work until tomorrow, but when you're free, come see me. Will you do that? I think I can promise me all right. I'll come to you when I'm free. Monday was a 12-hour workday, so I didn't get to Melly's house until the beginning of the 9th. Her mom opened the door and told me that Melly was waiting for me on the patio. Melly was on the phone with her back to the door when I got outside, and what I overheard before she closed her phone didn't bode well for our relationship. What I heard was, "I loved what we did on Friday. I can't wait to see you on Tuesday. I have to go now. He'll be here soon. Bye." I walked back into the house and then opened the patio door with a great deal of noise. She turned around and saw me coming out of the house. I didn't give any sign that I overheard anything. I just walked over to the table and sat down. I just looked at her and waited. She finally realized that I wasn't going to start a conversation, so she said, "What's wrong, Josh? You agreed to my dates when you couldn't make the time." That's when I thought these dates were something like going to a movie and maybe a milkshake at Harry's afterwards, or maybe a party like Matson's where you dance and socialize with our friends. Simple things so you could act like you're still my girlfriend. It's nothing like what I've seen at Matson's, the way you made out with that guy and let him run his hands all over. Your body, without even trying to stop him, pretty much told me that if he wasn't already you, he would soon not, the way I expected my girlfriend to behave in front of my friends. It's disgusting what you're telling me. I'm telling it like it is. Maybe you should just leave. I guess that would be the best thing to do after what I've seen, and not knowing if that's how you feel about all your dates. I think it might be a good idea to get tested. I stood up and left her with a shocked expression on my face. I made it to my car before she caught up with me. You don't really think of me that way, do you? What I saw Friday night was pretty rough. Melly, I don't want to take any chances. I got in the car and drove away, and she stood there staring after me. I did get tested and turned out to be healthy, but I never called Melly to let her know we avoided each other for a little over a week. And then on Thursday, when I was eating lunch in the student dining hall, Melly came over to my table, sat down, and said, "You didn't call me on Sunday. That wasn't necessary. You're being unfair." Josh, why do you expect me to stay home 6 days a week because of your job? Maybe because I look at it as on-the-job training. What the hell does that mean? Maybe it's to prepare you for what you might have to do after you get married, and your husband has a job that makes him work late. That's just silly. Being married isn't the same as going to school, maybe the way you look at it, but not the way I look at it. You knew all along that I intended to ask you to marry me after graduation, and you led me to believe you'd say yes. You know that my major is aviation maintenance management, and when I graduate, I will have my airplane and propulsion license. My goal is to work for an airline and get promoted. There's a darn good chance that if I do join an airline as a newbie, I'll have the worst shift and the worst weekends. If you can't handle my work schedule now, how are you going to handle my 3-to-1 shift with Tuesdays and Wednesdays off? That's different. I'll work too, and we'll do whatever is necessary to adjust to our circumstances that's in the future. If we have one right now, we need to survive as a couple. And I'm not sure we can, given what I now know about your dating. We agreed to talk that night after I finished work, and eventually she gave in and said she would only party on Fridays and Saturdays, and would always make sure the dates were with my friends. That way, I could always ask someone if she was doing anything that wouldn't pass the boyfriend test. It helped that landscaping was a seasonal job that ended in late fall for the rest of our freshman year, and all the way through senior year, I kept a close eye on her, and she only flipped out 3 times, and I pretended I didn't know anything. Why I blame it on love when we graduated. Melly moved in with me, and we lived together while our mother prepared the wedding. It was a new experience for both of us to be able to make love every day and not have to rush back home. There were nights when I wasn't at all sure I would be able to get out of bed in the morning. It seemed like all Melly and I, oh yes, and myself wanted was to make love all the time, but of course we couldn't. I did get along with the airline, and as always, I had the worst shift 4 to midnight, and my days off were Wednesday and Thursday. Melly had a degree in accounting, and she got a job at an accounting firm where she worked 8 to 5, and Saturday and Sunday were weekends during tax season from about the end of January through the 1st of May. She usually worked 10 to 12 hours a day, and sometimes she had to work Saturdays. We were married 5 months after graduation, and our wedding gift from both sets of parents was a down payment on a 4-bedroom house in one of the best neighborhoods in town. Neither of us wanted to have children until we were established in our jobs, so Mela used one of the bedrooms as a home office. There was a fairly large patio in the back of the house, and one of our first purchases after moving in was a 6-person hot tub on one side of the patio. It didn't take long before it started to feel like it was always full. We had a housewarming party a month after the tub was installed, and after everyone tried out the tub, it started to feel like we had company gathering every weekend. Not that I liked that company. I had to leave at 4 to 3 to get to work on time as we got to know our neighbors. We started getting invited to barbecues and picnics, and once that started happening, of course, we had to have a couple of our own. We became really good friends with the neighbors on either side of us, and those who live right across the street. Things went great for the first 2 years, and we adjusted to our different schedules, and then things changed. I found out much later, but it was pretty much what I was talking about when I talked to Melly back in college. I was working Friday and Saturday nights, and Melly was tired of staying home on the best date nights. At first, it was a night out with the girls after work on Friday night she never told me about. After a couple months, she decided that since she could get away with me not finding out about her night out with the girls, she could get away with going out on Saturdays. She just needed to make sure she would be home in bed by the time I got home. She started going out with guys she worked with and guys she met at her friends' parties. I don't know when the hell this started, so I had no idea how long it had been going on, but it was reported to me by a neighbor who lived across the street Friday night. After dinner, he was having a drink with a client and saw Melly dirty dancing with some guy and acting like a Saturday morning when Melly had gone shopping. He came over and told me what he'd seen. It upset me, but didn't surprise me. He told me that his brother was a police officer who moonlighted as a private investigator on his days off, and his brother's days off were Friday and Saturday. He said his brother's rates were 25% of what a full-time private investigator would charge. So I asked him to contact me. All it cost me was for him to follow Melly from Friday when she finished work until she went home, and Saturday from the time I left for work until she came home cost $600. And it was worth every penny. On Friday, when Melly got home from work, she headed straight to the bar, and no sooner had she sat down on the bar stool than a guy bought her a drink and danced with her. They left the bar at 8 and checked into the motel. And yes, they left the lights on for them and stayed in room 107 until 11. And then she went home. She didn't even leave the house on Saturday. Her boss from work stopped by at 4. And although Spencer the cop couldn't film what was going on in the house, he did get some pretty good footage of Melly fornicating with her boss on my first day off. I took everything I had to a divorce attorney, and after reviewing what I had, he suggested that I contact her boss for an alienation of affections and her company. If there was anything in their company's policy and procedure manual about the relationship between supervisors and those they supervise, I told him that her boss owned the company, and when I told him that I could almost see the dollar signs in his eyes, I told him to go ahead and take over. He asked me to give him a week or so and that he would prepare the paperwork so I could come in and sign it. I left his office hoping I could act like a know-nothing cuckold, which I was, until I got the Spencer report. I guess I succeeded because next to me, Melly didn't seem any different. The lawyer called me a week later and told me he had the paperwork ready for my signature. When I got to his office, he was smiling and said he had some very good news for me. Apparently, her boss was bragging to everyone in the office that he had Melly. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure the overheard conversation is just a rumor. It's basically a case of him saying he didn't say anything. Maybe if it wasn't taped. The man I got the tape from hates Philby and is always looking for some way to do him a disservice. Isn't there some law that says both parties have to be aware of the tape in some states? Yes, but this state is not one of them. All right, then go ahead and do what you think is best. I finished the story, reread it, and decided it was okay. I looked at the clock and saw that it was almost dinner time. I called my wife from the kitchen and handed her the story and asked her to read it and comment to me. She took the story from me and started reading it. About halfway through, she started to frown. And finally, with a loud whoop, she looked at me and fainted. I got up, grabbed a glass of water, and splashed it in her face. She mumbled something as I helped her up. Just then, the doorbell rang, and I told her it was probably for her. She looked confused as I walked her to the door. She opened the door and saw a young, blonde-haired girl standing there. The blonde stopped chewing her gum long enough to ask, "Mrs. Melinda Barnum?" Melinda said yes, and the blonde handed her an envelope with the words, "You have been notified, have a nice evening," and she turned and walked away. Melinda didn't hear the last sentence. She fainted again when she heard she had been notified. This time I didn't bother with a glass of water. I just grabbed her leg and dragged her into the room far enough to close the door, then went into the kitchen and got myself a beer. Then I went into the living room and turned on the TV. I was just getting out of the shower when my cell phone rang with curses. I wrapped the towel around me and hurried into the bedroom to grab it off the dresser. Darlene had already left for some last-minute Christmas shopping, and we planned to meet later at the EC consultant's office before I could say hello. A cheerful male voice spoke up. "Hi, Darlene. Is there any chance we can meet tonight for some quick sex? I just can't wait 2 whole more days for you to hold me." "What the hell are you talking about?" I said angrily. A convulsive sigh was heard, followed by 2 or 3 seconds of complete silence. Then a click of disconnection stunned. I looked at the phone. What the hell was that? After a moment, I realized it was Darlene's phone, not mine. They were the same model, but mine had a crack in the screen glass that was missing on the one I was holding in my hand. She must have grabbed the wrong phone on her way to the door, but who would be calling her looking for sex anyway? Dick, was she on the side? It looked that way, stunned. I hung up the phone, went back into the bathroom, and wiped myself down, my thoughts racing. All I could think was, this can't be happening. Darlene and I have been married for 6 years by mutual agreement. We have no children. In the last few months have been pretty rough. We still got along, and she still loved me, of course, but her interest in sex had all but disappeared from 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes at least at her initiative. We had dwindled to once or twice a month, and even then only at my insistence. And when we did have sex, she was passive and unenthusiastic, not the passionate and enthusiastic partner she had been at the beginning of our marriage. We talked about the problem over and over again. Darlene kept telling me that it wasn't anything special. She was just tired, overly busy at work, blah, 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 except that nothing had changed at her job. No big projects, no horrible deadlines, no promotions. Every time I brought it up, Darlene would reply that she was feeling better. And occasionally that night we made love, but it quickly came back to the same thing I asked. She denies. By the end of September, I was sick of it. And that evening after dinner, I sat her down on the couch. "Darlene, I love you, but I'm not ready to go on like this. I don't want to go the rest of my life without sex. You used to love having sex with me, and now you obviously don't anymore. Something has to change, or I'm filing for divorce." She looked at me completely stunned. "Divorce? Jesus, honey, isn't that a little drastic? Darlene, do you know how bad it is? I decided to find out we've had 3 quickie hookups in the last 3 months, plus making love once. That's 4 times since the 1st of July. And in that time, you've turned me down 18 times. I'm not going to live like this anymore." She looked under her feet, obviously feeling very uncomfortable. "Baby, I'm sorry. You know that I love you, and I can do better, and I will. I promise. I'm just so tired. That's not good enough. Darlene, I want 2 promises from you, or I'm going to see a lawyer on Monday." She looked at me wryly, and I continued. "First, I want you to see Dr. Evans and get a full examination to make sure there are no physical problems. And second, I want us to start seeing a marriage counselor, but we didn't have anything bad happen." "Yes, we did. Are you listening to me, Darlene? We're practically living together like brother and sister. Whether you want to admit it or not, something did go wrong, and we either try to fix it or I'm leaving." A long argument ensued, full of Darlene's tears, but I was adamant and finally got my way. She met with Dr. Evans, who confirmed her complete health, and we started meeting once a week with Eileen Archer, a counselor recommended by our friends Brad and Allison, who had worked with her a couple of years ago. We counseled for about 2 months. And things were going well, or at least I thought so. We talked a lot about our relationship, about everyone's jobs, about the families we grew up in, and what our parents' marriages were like. Some of it seemed boring or inappropriate, but Eileen was sure we'd Made progress even though life in our bedroom hadn't improved from it so far. We had talked more about relationships and how we got out of bed rather than sex. Eileen's slogan for me was, "Be patient." And for both of us, be honest with yourself and your partner, now standing in the bedroom staring at Darlene's phone as if a snake had crawled out of it. I had to wonder, had I just discovered the real reason she no longer wanted to spa with me? Was it that simple? Had I been replaced someone else stepping in and fulfilling the role of traditional husband? As far as I could see, nothing had changed in Darlene's schedule. She no longer worked late, didn't go on mysterious shopping trips or dates with the girls, didn't come home flushed and disheveled and run straight to the shower, but that didn't mean she wasn't sleeping with some, she just did it with care. I picked up her phone and checked calls received, and to my surprise, there was only one call there. The one I had just answered, the caller was identified as CM. I pressed answer and waited until it went to a dial tone. Not surprisingly, the guy didn't dare pick up and the call was transferred to voicemail. "This is Chris Mason. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Have a good day." I hung up the phone. I recognized the name. He was another employee at the brokerage firm where Darlene worked, but in some other division she had mentioned him to me once or twice, but I had never met him. I checked Darlene's cell phone more thoroughly. Not only had all previous received calls been deleted, but also the miss, and sent call lists who would take the time to delete all that Darlene was obviously covering her tracks. I headed for the office looking for cell phone and home phone statements for the past few months. The bills were paid by Darlene, so I never had any reason to look for them in the desk. I found all of our home phone bills, but a search revealed no calls from Chris Mason, or at least not from his cell phone, but cell phone records for the past 8 months were missing. I looked in the checkbook and all the cell phone bills were paid, so Darlene must have hidden or thrown away the receipts, no doubt, because they showed calls to Chris Mason. I arrived at Eileen's office about 20 minutes early. Darlene's car wasn't in the parking lot yet, so I sat down and thought for a while. If I was right, if Darlene was cheating on me with Chris Mason or anyone else, our marriage was over. She may love me, but it's not worth a damn if she's spreading her legs for someone else. I assume she loved me otherwise. Why would she want to stay together? Why bother seeing a counselor besides seemingly lying to both the counselor and me? But if she thought she could eat fish, and well, she'd have to find out she was completely wrong. I thought at first to meet Darlene in Eileen's office today, share the contents of the call from Chris and demand an explanation, but realized that wasn't enough for me. I wanted proof, and then I wanted to spectacularly end our marriage by rubbing Darlene's nose in it. I was angry and hurt, and she should pay for what she'd done to me, and I had a much better place in mind for our final confrontation than Eileen's office. So I went inside, and a short time later, Darlene showed up, kissed me, and we went into a meeting. Eileen got us talking about the usual nonsense about how we handled arguments in our relationship, and whether the difference in styles was based on our experiences and how our parents are argued, etc. I played along, looked thoughtful and serious, tried to give plausible answers, and managed not to grit my teeth too hard. That damn, I wanted to grab her by the throat and strangle her right in front of Eileen toward the end of the session. Eileen gave me a chance to get one good reason to tease, even if only lightly. She said something like, "I know this is hard for both of you, but gradually we're learning about your marriage, about each of your expectations for it, and your honesty is actually fostering an atmosphere where we can move the conversation from general to productive discussion of your sexual issues as well." I interjected to say thank you for saying that, Eileen. It's been difficult for me at times, but I've tried to be completely honest and forthright. It seems to be the only way to accomplish anything. Darlene, would you say that this is true for you as well? I watched her as she blushed slightly and avoided my eyes. Instead, she looked at Eileen, nodded, and said, "Absolutely, Alan." I feel the same way. I wondered if Eileen had noticed Darlene's obvious discomfort. She didn't comment on it, but I thought she looked at Darlene intently for a moment or two. After the session, we walked across the street to a diner for a quick lunch. When she went to the ladies' room, I quickly took my cell phone out of her purse and put it in my pocket. I then went outside to buy a newspaper from a vending machine. And while there, I turned off Darlene's cell phone, wrapped it in newspaper, and stuck it in the bottom of the trash can. I figured that Chris Mason would be frantically trying to contact Darlene to let her know what had happened, so I was going to make sure he never had a chance to get to her during lunch. Darlene and I chatted about nothing, mostly about her shopping and what gifts we would still need the next day when we were going to her parents' house for Christmas dinner. We made a list of what we needed and then went to a row of crowded stores to buy the last few items. I was amazed at my ability to keep my mouth shut to pretend to be nice when all I wanted to do was hit her. But either I was a better actor than I thought or Darlene was too distracted. But she didn't notice that anything was wrong at home. The corded phone rang 3 times during dinner, and each time I jumped up to pick it up, the first 2 were just silenced the 3rd time. About 20 minutes later, a female voice I had never heard before asked, "May I speak to Darlene, please?" I wondered if Chris in desperation had hired some friend to give Darlene a message from him and said, "Can I ask who's calling?" A voice answered. Iris from work." Smiling to myself, I said, "What's to refer to?" She was stumped. There was a short silence, and then she said, "Oh, there's an account we're both working on, and I have a couple questions about it on Christmas Eve." I said I'm afraid she can't come to the phone right now, but I'll be sure to give her a message. Have a good evening. And I hung up the phone with a smile. Darlene looked at me questioningly when I returned, and I said, "Some lady is taking a survey. Can you believe them calling on Christmas Eve?" I could tell that Darlene was a little concerned. She waited a few minutes, then casually walked out into another room. No doubt checking her cell phone, she returned with her purse and looked concerned. "Darling, do you have any idea where my cell phone might be?" I remember taking it off the dresser when I went. "Out this morning, Darlene, I have no idea. It's not in your purse. Did you look by your car, or maybe you left it somewhere at the mall?" She went and searched the car, but to no avail, and I sat there smiling. Eventually, she gave up, and I promised to get her a new one as a New Year's present. Don't count on it, honey. I thought to myself, I'm sure her next move would have been to try to call Chris. If she could get rid of me for even a few minutes several times throughout the evening, I noticed Darlene watching me with the corner of her eye. I wondered if she was hoping for a chance to get to the phone. Finally, she said, "Honey, I'm a little tired. I'm going to go upstairs and just watch TV for a while." "Okay, sure, Darlene," I replied. "That actually sounds wonderful. I'll just put the dishes in the sink and we'll go together." She smiled at me, but I could see she was annoyed. An hour later, she asked me to check that there were no trash cans at the curb when I reminded her that tomorrow was Christmas, and there was no pickup. She turned away from me with obvious disappointment when we went to bed. She didn't get a chance to call anyone Christmas morning. I got up early, ate breakfast while Darlene slept, and made a few preparations, then went into the bedroom and gently woke her up. "Good morning, dear, Merry Christmas." I gave her a fake smile. "There's coffee ready in the kitchen. I'm off. I'll see you later at your parents' house." She sat down awkwardly. "It's only 8:30, Alan. Where are you going?" I smiled again. "I need to pick up a last-minute gift for you, dear, but don't worry. I'll see you there at 2. She protested, saying, "Weren't all the stores closed today, and couldn't I come home later and pick her up?" But I was already on my way to the door, sending her a kiss. At 8:45, I knocked on Chris Mason's apartment door, having found his address in Darlene's service directory. I was counting on him being in town today, as he had mentioned that he was looking forward to seeing Darlene the next day. When he opened the door, he was dressed in a robe and looked sleepy. A tall, not battle-looking guy, about 25 or so. Yeah, what the hell? He stopped talking and retreated to his living room, and I walked in and quickly closed the door behind me. I was holding a Hammerly 2008C air pistol aimed directly at his chest. It wasn't such a deadly weapon, just something I used for short-range practice. But Mason clearly didn't know that he looked absolutely terrified. "Let me introduce myself, Chris. I'm Alan Rattan, Darlene's husband. Your current sexual partner." His eyes widened, and he took another step back. "Hey, kid. Calm down, okay? I don't know what you're... Anyway, Chris, you called yesterday asking for sex? Do you really think I can't figure out what's going on? Now, here's what's going to happen. We're going to sit here in your living room and have a nice chat. If I don't get the answers I want, I'll shoot you once or twice in the balls and leave you to bleed to death if you decide to be more responsive. After a while, we'll visit some people I know and talk to them, and then I'll leave you to live your life, understand?" He looked at me cautiously, nodding his head slightly. "All I have to do is talk to you." I nodded. "Uh-huh, and I'll leave you alone damn bad if you get shot, isn't it?" Chris and I chatted for a while, and he told me everything I wanted to know. I then supervised him as he got his clothes and took them into the bathroom to shower and get dressed. After that, he made us sandwiches in his kitchen, and we ate. I kept the gun pointed at him the whole time. We didn't talk much. But that was good for me. At 1:45, we went out and got in my car. I gave Chris the address and told him to drive while I myself sat in the back seat with the gun in my hand. When we got to Darlene's parents' house, I had Chris park 4 houses away so they couldn't see my car. I noticed that Darlene's car was already there along with the car that belonged to her sister, Barbara, and her husband. But I wanted to make an impressive entrance, so we sat and waited until 2:30 before I got Chris out of the car and walked him to their driveway. No games now, got it. "Chris," I asked, "do you remember the arrangement we go in? I make a few introductory remarks, you tell your story, and I leave, and you save your testicles. I'll have my gun in my pocket, but it'll show up in less than 1 second if you do some to me." He looked somewhere between like he was uncomfortable and wildly terrified. "Don't worry, man. I'll play it just like you said when we rang the doorbell. Darlene's mom." Sarah opened the door. Her welcoming smile turned into a perplexed one when she saw Chris. "Hi, Alan." Who's this hi? Sarah, Merry Christmas," I said, kissing her on the cheek as we entered the foyer. "This is Chris. He's only here for a few minutes." Ignoring her confusion, I took Chris by the hand and led him straight into the dining room where the family was just about to start appetizers. Apparently, they were going to start without me. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said with a happy smile, looking at the surprised faces. Darlene's father, Tom, was sitting there, and her sister, Barbara, and her husband, Mark, and their 2 boys, Teddy and Ben, farther back, sat Darlene. There was a vague but pleased, even anticipatory expression on everyone else's face. Here's a nice surprise, they thought, an extra guest. But Darlene looked as pale as a ghost. Her mouth opened a couple of inches, and I thought she might faint attention. "Everyone, this is Chris. He is Darlene's co-worker, and he has a little story to tell us." "Come on, Chris." Darlene has risen to her feet. "No, Alan, it's not." I quickly interrupted her. "It's okay, Darlene. I think everyone needs to hear this." She took a few quick steps toward the door, but I grabbed her arm and hugged her tightly. "Come on, Chris." Darlene tried to free herself from me by saying, "No, no, Chris, don't." I put my free hand over her mouth to silence her while her parents looked on in utter amazement. Chris reluctantly began to speak, dark. "Darlene and I were having an affair. It started in April and has been going on ever since Darlene's family OD then stared at Chris, then at Darlene and me." After a long pause, Barbara lifted Teddy and Ben out of their chairs and pushed them into the living room where she turned on the TV, then returned and closed the door behind her. "Go on, Chris." I smiled. "We've been seeing each other at work. The fitness center has several massage rooms with doors that can be locked. We do this about twice a week, meeting at different times, so no one has noticed a pattern. We work on different floors of the building, so no one realized we were leaving at the same time. There are showers, where we clean up afterward." Darlene continued to fight me. She tried to bite my arm, but I held her firmly, and "Chris," I said, "what exactly did you 2 do together? Please be specific." He didn't meet my eyes. I loved the look.